You can walk along the ground, you can drive along in a car and look out across the fields, and you can actually see where people live. You can actually feel where they live.
Locating and protecting archaeological sites is the job of state archaeologist Calvin Jones. It's a job he considers to be more than just science. To Calvin, it's also an art. Hello and welcome to Southern Circuit. I'm Rickley Stone. This week's journey takes us in and around Tallahassee to meet 4 artists, each with distinctly different interests. Take welder John Fund, for instance. He hopes to make his art his livelihood, so he utilizes his front yard on Highway 90 as a sort of business card for his work. Gabrielle Wu Li is a medical doctor from China. She's also a painter who uses her canvas as a means of expressing her impressions of her new home, the United States. Mike Jones expresses himself through the art of music as a member of Tallahassee's Bogaziti Band. But that's just part of the picture, as you'll see when we begin tonight's journey right here at the Tallahassee Junior Museum. Stay with us. He's a big guy with a big heart and a lot of loves. They include his music.
It's hard to believe that soon you will disappear, but I'll be content just to have you while you're here.
Load up.
His dog Junior.
Let's go. Load up.
And his job as the animal caretaker for Tallahassee's Junior Museum.
Animals are nice people.
Mike Jones is nice people too. He lives on the property of the Tallahassee Junior Museum, so he can be close at hand if anything goes wrong with the animals. That's his job. In the 8.5 years Mike has worked as the zoo's animal caretaker, he's built 6 natural habitats and lots of 4-legged friends.
I worked at another natural habitat zoo called Charlestown Landing in Charleston, South Carolina. It was one of the first natural habitat zoos in the country. And the museum was looking for somebody to come down and develop their natural habitat zoo, design habitats and build them and develop an animal program. So I came down and looked at the museum, and I really liked the Tallahassee area, close to the Gulf, and good, pretty freshwater rivers around, and I like the museum, the location, and the layout, the raw material to work with, located on the edge of a lake like this. Is just a natural spot for a natural habitat zoo, so I decided to come on down and give it a whirl. The animals come first. First thing when we go to work in the morning, we take care of all the animals' physical needs. Certain animals are fed in the morning. Animals like the panthers and the bears and the otters are put in security cages at night, in holding cages, so they have to be let out of those cages, and those cages are cleaned and husbandry type work. And then the rest of the day is devoted to maintenance, fixing a fence line that might have a hole in it, or health care if you have an animal that you need to take to a vet, or feeding, some educational type duties, like if I need to talk to a class, or give a snake or reptile class, or maybe bring a class down the trail and talk about the animals. It's kind of relaxing to look at the animals and know that they're benefiting from your actions, and so that's the most satisfying and rewarding part of it. Also, building habitats is pretty satisfying to sit down with a piece of paper and draw out an aviary or whatever, and then actually physically put one together. There's a lot of satisfaction involved in that too. This site behind me here is the site for our red wolf habitat. And the first thing we do is take into consideration the needs of the animals themselves. And this is a thickly wooded, and it's an area where the animals can hide when they want to. They can get out over this way in the open field area into the sunshine. And it also falls right in the natural progression on the nature trail. You know, it's an illogical point so that you don't have to go out of your way to see the wolves. It falls right in with the bobcats and the otters. And there'll be a ramp going up and a Y-shaped viewing area, 2 bridges that you'll be able to stand on and look into the area and see the wolves. We hope to begin construction in June or July. So in the fall of '85 this year, you'll be able to see red wolves out here.
Come here.
Just throw one to them, Gene.
Can I throw the water?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
When you see a group of people stand around and watch the otters for 20 minutes, they're just enthralled by what's going on. And it gives you a good feeling knowing that you were, a part of what made that happen, that experience happen for those people. I look at it that these animals are giving their lives in return for a better life and better opportunities for all of these other animals out in the wild. And that's the way I justify keeping animals in captivity, as an educational tool to educate the public to be more aware that they aren't the only living things around. There are a lot of animals that are sharing the same space. And that's the whole idea of this, education. This is probably the most fun job there is. The only thing that could make this job more fun would be if it paid a whole lot more money than it does. But it's a great job, Where else do you get to spend your days out in the outdoors and the sunshine or in the fresh air? And your fellow employees are black bears, and they never have anything bad to say about you. It's a great job. What more could you want?
Artwork is not really what you'd expect of a Chinese artist, but for Gabrielle Wu Li, the visual language of her art is more an analogy of her life experiences, her feelings, and her emotions. She was a medical doctor back in Shanghai, but as the daughter of an art connoisseur with a rich collection of Chinese traditional paintings, she also had an intense interest in art. And it was just that interest that brought Gabrielle, along with her husband Paul, from their homeland of China to Tallahassee, Florida in 1982.
The United States is a very advanced country, both in science and art. So we decided to got admission from the university, and finally we got, and the Florida State University is very famous in geology, also in art, and I think a very strong faculty members here. First, we feel very something we need to adjust to the lives and also to the speech and to language and anything else we need to pick up. We learned English for since middle school and high school for a while, but still we are not having the chance to practice how to speak. So it's still till now I feel I cannot express what I want to say sometimes.
What she can't describe with words comes across clearly in her paintings, which have been aptly described by those who know her as strong statements about herself.
I think my paintings try to describe the activities of my own thoughts and my own feelings. But what I want to do is to express beauty of the nature and also the beauty of the work. Also, I think I want my paintings to serve as a part of what I can do for the humanity. I think this is very important. The doctor is a very good doctor is a kind of serving for the humanity also, but physically or maybe mentally. But artists, sometimes I feel art in a different way to help people.
Sure is interesting. Beautiful view.
And this one is I painted for in memory of my parents. My father died during Cultural Revolution, and I feel the disaster comes just like suddenly, because he was pretty healthy, I think. So we got the news, and I saw he was dying. So that's the feeling I feel. I was so despair. As I was a doctor, I know I have no way to save his life. So this is a frustrating and despair and deep sorrow, heartbreaking. And I still feel some feeling of hope. So you can see the splash of the silvers. And these are really a very strong struggling of my emotional also. As a doctor, I watched these patients when they were dying, and I tried to comfort them, and also to serve indeed their families. But from my own experience, I feel really different.
All her paintings she called my children. Some people ask her about which one you like most, and she say, "Can I say, which child you like most? No way, just because you love them all, even they have some fault, if they have some, even they have not perfect there." She worked diligently on her paintings, and even it's a sub-freezing point outside the house. We don't have a studio. We only have a kind of a breezeway, they call it, So the breeze just can come through. And because she used some kind of painting is enamel and there's poisonous, vapors. And she preferred to work outside. And even the freezing point, she worked, 5 hours and outside and just sweating.
Always striving for perfection, Gabrielle disciplines herself by practicing the ancient art of calligraphy each day, incorporating many of the same brushstrokes in her paintings. For this artist from China, the goal right now is to express herself, and she does just that through her contemporary American artwork.
If what I want to express, then I feel it's on the paintings, and then I feel I'm satisfied. But sometimes I still look at my painting, well, I feel not that way. Yeah, and anyway, but the paintings can be mostly express what I want to say, and I feel it's okay.
FSU student John Fund sees himself as a kid who never grew up. So as the old adage goes, he just changed his toys. In fact, he made them himself and hopes that one day they'll make him a living.
I've always been doing kind of unusual things. This is just one of them.
The Metal Menagerie on Highway 90 East on the outskirts of Tallahassee is the creation of FSU engineering student John Fund. His fantasy playground equipment attracts passerbys, both young and old, to stop and play. He learned how to weld in a class at Tallahassee Community College, but that was just the beginning for the 24-year-old inventor.
After I finished with the welding class in the machine shop, I was in some accounting and business type programs. And one of them was an entrepreneur class, and the object of the class was to prepare a imaginary business for a bank loan. And this was the imaginary business that I made up. Since I had the welding background, I made up a welding type business. And I made this one model here as part of my presentation for the bank officer. And I just liked the idea more and more as I worked with it. And finally I decided to give it a try. This one is called Dino the Dinosaur. This is the first one that I've made. I actually built the first one of these at my sister's house working out of her garage. That was before I lived here. And then I've built this one since then. The second one that I built is this weightlifter over here. I actually started in her garage too, and that one I moved here in two pieces. That's why it's bolted together in the middle. The third one that I built is this pterodactyl over here. This was one that was so big that when I brought it from my shop where I worked out to here, I had to bring it out in pieces and put the wings on after I got it out here, because it was just actually too big to move. Another one that was too big to move is the spider web. I had to bring it with one of the corners off to get it like down the driveway so I could actually move it. Then I started getting into making the half-size ones. Over there I have a half-size Dino the Dinosaur that I call Tot, and a half-size weight man that I call Butch. Part of the reason why it's so challenging for me is because there's a lot of different requirements that I have to meet when I'm building a piece of playground equipment. The most fun part for me is that it has to represent something. It has to be exciting to look at and enjoyable. But then there's a lot of other more stricter requirements, like I have to be safe, and it has to be strong, and it has to last, and things like that. So really, when I go to build a piece of playground equipment, there's a lot of very complicated and sometimes conflicting requirements that I have to meet, and it makes it all the more challenging and more interesting for me to do. But I try to keep it as close to the real thing, whether I'm representing an animal or whatever, as it can be, so that when a child looks at it, they really think that it is what it's supposed to be.
I like it. I like having an uncle who builds this. I think it's real neat. I really like it. I think it's fun, neat. Kids,
they really thrive on fantasy, and that's why my equipment is so appealing to them. And I like to stimulate that in people and in kids, and that's what I like to work with. It's interesting and exciting. A regular swing set or something like that is really boring compared to a fantasy friend that you can play on and with. I would like to see them, I think, in maybe something like campgrounds or national parks, something like that, something where a lot of kids would get to play on them. Schools would be good too, something more of a vacation type situation. I like them in people's homes, but the problem with that is people can't really have more than one at their house. Where if you had a park, I could do something like a theme park possibly and have maybe all dinosaurs in one, or all different forms of biplanes or antique cars or something like that. I would kind of be interested in getting into themes like that. In the past 2 years, when I first started building this playground equipment, along with developing the playground equipment itself, I have really developed a lot. I've learned so much in doing it. And I can see that I could probably never do any more than just build playground equipment, and it would be a fine and interesting life. But I really think that what I need more than that is to go and learn this engineering that I want and maybe go into other fields. I can see this playground equipment more of a means to an end than actually an end in itself. I hope never to stop doing it, but there's a lot of other things I would like to do also. What I most want to do is I want to pioneer the ocean, so to speak. I want to build housing and machines and equipment and even evolve techniques for using the ocean and living underneath the ocean. That's an area that fascinates me. I'm from Key West originally, and I did a lot of diving before I moved up here. And it's a whole new world down there. It's really beautiful, and it's kind of like a new frontier. And that new frontier idea also excites me and interests me. And I want to explore and develop it. I enjoy the challenge of trying to do something that hasn't been done before. Makes it all that more worthwhile of a thing to do.
Calvin Jones is an artist, and his art reflects the images he finds in his work. As an archaeologist for the state of Florida, his job is to find out about the people who lived here first. He does this through their art, their tools, and fragments of clay pots.
I suppose it all has to do with heritage. We seem to identify with our past heritage. In other words, I say it's in the blood. In my case, it is partly in the blood. My father was part Creek. Was born in Indian Territory in the Creek Nation at Tulsa, Broken Arrow on the Arkansas River. And so I sort of grew up with the idea that Indians might be neat people. And truly enough, to me, that they are fascinating. And so at about 12 years old, I took quite an interest after finding the first arrowhead they were found. And to me, it just enlightened me tremendously. Behind that arrowhead, I could see the people, the man who made it. It was like a whole new horizon opening up to me. So from that point on, I decided that archaeology might be the thing I wanted to do. So from the many sites I've had the good fortune to excavate or to look at, to appraise, to survey, that probably the Mound 3 at Lake Jackson it's probably been the most interesting thing I've ever worked on. Lake Jackson mounds are very intriguing. They're the largest mound site in northern Florida that we found, and we don't know a lot about them. I wish we knew more. However, we do know some things. This huge mound here is the largest mound out at Lake Jackson Ceremonial Center, and the date's probably within about the 1200 to 1600 AD time period. It was made by a tribe of people that were partly ancestral to the Appalachian Indians. There's 7 mounds out here at Lake Jackson, and the Great Temple Mound is the largest one, and only one mound has been excavated by an archaeologist, and I had the good fortune to do that in 1975 and 76. 2.5 of the mounds of the 7 are on state property, and this big one is mostly on state property. The one I excavated was in 1975, and it belonged to the Crowder family. It's the Sam Crowder family. They kindly allowed me, on behalf of the state, to excavate it. It was Mound 3, a mound that was 16 feet high. It was flat-topped, very similar to this mound, and it had about 24 individuals buried in it with their paraphernalia, and all of those artifacts buried with them seemed to relate to war. And the fact that those artifacts that they had were so unusual indicates such high status. The copper breastplates, for example, and hors d'oeuvre plates, or whatever you want to call them, in the shape of probably falcons, possibly eagles. And these are the neatest things that you might expect to find, really, in the southeastern United States, particularly this individual who is dressed in probably the falcon cape with all the falcon paraphernalia, along with individual items like a conch gorget here, a conch pendant, and shell beads, and wearing the hawk nose mask. War club, and the head is cut off of maybe an enemy or possibly a sacrifice, with a breechcloth, the beaded belt, the moccasins, pearl beads around. These were probably pearls, since we found them on the individuals themselves, real pearls that they collected from the rivers and so forth. These very high status individuals were quite enlightening to me in the sense that we pictorially actually had the way they looked. This was most fascinating because to excavate particularly this burial, for example, there were several that had copper breastplates, but this one was so deep in the mound, it was 18 feet deep from the top of the mound. They went to a great deal of trouble to place this individual, as they did the others, in the mound, allowing me to see this person after being buried for 700 years, and to be the one to uncover it at the time of uncovery. I knew beforehand that the individual was going to be unusual in the sense of having something with him to indicate his status that would be quite fascinating. And truly enough, within a foot away from the burial, we began to sense that this individual would have something very unusual. And this is probably the largest copper breastplate ever found in the United States that was made by the prehistoric, pre-contact Indians. So probably this plate here alone is one of the most unusual artifacts that I might ever expect to find on an archaeological dig or any other archaeologist in the United States, particularly in the Southeast. The actual field work is what I probably prefer the most in terms of searching out locations and being able to see how, well, I say the ancient ones lived in terms of finding new locations and trying to figure out who was there, when, and how they lived and so forth. Of course, unless this is shared with people, unless it's put into reports, it's not of value after we're gone. So what we look at is the rim right here. We look at the rim to see how it's made, and we think up names for these things, so if we find them somewhere else, and we'll be able to identify them again and get an age on them. Many people bring in artifacts that they found in their front yard and their grandfather's cornfield or something someplace like that, and often they lead to important sites. There are often sites that we can't do much about other than record the information as to where they are, but they will eventually become important in terms of if some development is going to threaten them and so forth, we will know about those sites. And often they're unusual kind of sites, first kind, one-of-a-kind sites. Some people bring in artifacts that we're astounded by sometimes, things we've never seen before. And that happens quite often. So we're a public agency in response to be there to look at artifacts when people find them and bring them in. There are not many places that people can turn to where there's anybody that knows much about what it is that they find. The universities and us are about all they are. My goal is to continue to be fascinated by the many peoples who've lived here, by studying them and where they lived and how they lived. We're moving too fast today. We're all in a frenzied state, and you can't keep from being if you're within the mainstream. You know, we're moving too fast. We should stop and smell the flowers a little more.
That's this week's Southern Circuit. Thank you for being with us. Be sure and join us again next week when Southern Circuit journeys to Wakulla to meet Buddy Page, a blacksmith and diver who enjoys collecting artifacts from Florida waters. We'll also make stops in Grand Ridge and Tallahassee. We hope to see you then. Have a good week.